everyone, and welcome back to This is USG, a video podcast of the universities at Shady Grove. 9 universities, 1 campus, great results. I'm Ann Kademian, Executive Director of USG, and today I am delighted to be joined by USG's new and first ever Chief Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer. Dr. Jeffrey Ash joined our campus community just a few months back, and he brings a wealth of knowledge and experience to USG in the important arena of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Jeff, it is such a pleasure not only to have you on our team, but also to welcome you to our podcast.
Well, good afternoon. Thank you. Thank you, Ann. It's a pleasure to be here. It's a pleasure to be here at USG as well. So thank you for having me on today.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us.
Sure.
Jeff, let's start with a little bit of a self-introduction so our audience can learn more about you. Tell us a little bit about your journey, how you came to leadership roles in diversity, equity, inclusion, but a little bit about your own educational journey as well. Could you share with us?
Sure, my pleasure. I initially started in the university system in 1998. For those who are doing the math, I started when I was 10, but I started in College Park as a retirement counselor in the Office of Human Resources. In that role, I got really fortunate, and I'll be honest, it wasn't on purpose. I was invited in, I think, around 2006 by the Office of Human Relations to participate in a multi-university study on race and gender and relationships. I learned an awful lot about myself, race and gender and relationships through that process. And from that experience, I began to be known as the diversity guy. I'll admit I didn't embrace that initially, but I began to attend workshops, professional development opportunities around race, racism, gender, genderism, ageism. So from the University of Maryland at College Park, I ended up taking a faculty position at UMBC in their Erickson School for Aging Studies. Again, now embracing the diversity guy role. I really carved out a specialty, began doing workshops and trainings in a variety of places. Fast forwarding to 2016, I accepted a position at the University of Maryland, Baltimore at the School of Nursing, being the inaugural associate dean on that campus for diversity, equity, and inclusion. My educational background, I have a bachelor's degree in economics from Towson University, a master's degree in organizational development and training from University of Maryland, now called Global Campus. And I have a doctorate degree from Morgan State University in urban education.
Fantastic. Well, we are delighted to be able to bring you here from University of Maryland, Baltimore, where you were the Associate Dean in Diversity, Equity, Inclusion at the School of Nursing. Of course, we have the partnership school here as well in the School of Nursing, so that's a lovely connection. You know, Jeff, as I hear your story, I hear a lot of self-taught, that you were curious, you wanted to learn more, you reached out, you developed this talent and knowledge with a lot of your own self-motivation. I also, as I hear you talking to colleagues and introducing yourself, you emphasize your open door policy. You're never too busy. That's something we hear you say a lot. Never too busy, right? For a colleague or a student or someone who needs to talk. And I wonder if you could share with us a little bit about the underlying philosophy that you bring to your leadership in this space. Everything from the open door policy, never too busy, and this fabulous drive to continuously learn more. Every time I talk to you, you're reading something new. You've started a new book. You're constantly thinking about how to advance the work you're leading with the community. Could you talk with us a little bit about how these pieces might fit together, or something else that really drives your leadership philosophy in this area?
Well, that's a great question. My leadership philosophy, and I always start with the retirement HR experience from human resources in College Park first. When I first started doing that, it was paperwork for me. One of the things I learned fairly quickly that for the person retiring, I noticed it was more than paperwork for them. And I began to notice for the first time, for many that were retiring, it was a chance to share their story about who they were and what working there had meant to them. So much so that I built that into my process where I would ask people, so tell me about yourself. We're each very unique individuals. And I just don't think we offer enough opportunities for folks to share their stories and who they are. I think in addition to that, a lot of times in our workplace cultures, there's fear, there's anxiety and frustration. And I don't think that you can always schedule time to talk about those things. So I think it's really important for my door to be open. One, for folks, a good percentage of what I do is really just listen to folks, be a place where folks can be really heard, their thoughts, their feelings, their perceptions. So, there are things on folks' minds that I don't think sometimes can be scheduled. And I always want folks to know this door, I'm looking at the door here real quick, that my door is truly open. Sometimes folks will stop by and say, sorry to come in. Well, I'm like, well, the door's open for a reason. So being that person, being that office is really important to me, and really creating the space for folks to share their stories, I think is a key component and ingredient to a successful diversity, equity, and inclusion office.
Today you and I had the pleasure of meeting with our student ambassadors, and it was terrific to hear you share your story, but also to engage with the students. They had lots of great questions, but I could see this kind of this learning taking place. So I see continuous learning as another key component of how you approach this, and that you're never done. You've never got it just right. It's this creating this context of always learning, always open, always hearing what others have to say. Do you agree with that? Or how does this continuous learning fit into the way you approach this work as well?
Well, I think, I'm often introduced sometimes as the expert. One, I don't think there's any such thing. And folks will often ask me, well, what can I do? Well, one of the things we all can do is continuously learn to read about a variety of cultures. We can all spend time with people who are different than ourselves. That's not something you do during a particular month. That's not something you do during a particular day. I think that's something that we all have to do all the time. So it never ends for me. I always want to make sure that I'm studying my craft, that I'm aware of a lot of our cultural issues, events, not only on this campus, but around the state of Maryland and across our country. And you really can't do that necessarily in an office. You have to be out and about. You have to engage folks. You have to be on committees. You have to surround yourself with other leaders who do this work. You have to, one of the things I really want this office to stand for is literally meeting people where they are. So, and that's ongoing, that's in the building, that's in Montgomery County. So it's all of those things for me.
That's great. Let's talk a little bit about diversity, equity, inclusion in higher ed. We've been reading in different education journals and reports about diversity, equity, inclusion being really under threat in terms of the offices, in terms of the policies and practices at a political level, but also at an administrative level. Talk with me about the criticality of this. Why is diversity, equity, inclusion so important in higher ed? And you and I had a conversation early on, And, we were talking about this new office, and I think we both embrace this idea that it's not an office. Diversity, equity, inclusion is a foundation to everything we need to be doing here. It needs to be embedded. And so could you talk a bit about diversity, equity, inclusion in higher ed, its importance here on the Shady Grove campus?
Sure.
You have my full support for building, I'm going to use your term, an unprecedented foundation here. So could you reflect on that for us and highlight what you see as the importance of diversity, equity, inclusion embedded in higher education?
Sure. Well, thank you. When I think of just DEI, and I'll use the acronym DEI, it's a concept where we advocate, promote, really respectfully, where we just really value at a really high level all of our uniqueness. So we all have come from different backgrounds. We're different ages. When I think of the future fluid student, that's a person could be any age, from any background, any experience, any part of the country. So when I think about that, we have to advocate and promote in a way, not where there's one size that fits all. We have, and that's the difference between equal and equity. Equal is everybody gets the same thing, but equity is where you apply your resources where the need is the greatest. So if we're going to be equitable in our approach, we have to look at individuals and again, literally meeting them where they are. It's really important that, a lot of our structures just were not ideally built for women and minorities. So we really have to look at individuals and that individual's needs and look at ourselves as an organization on how can we best meet that individual's needs to remove any potential barriers. So I think we're at a place where the landscape is changing, where we're much more aware now of racism, our unique needs. It's really important that we meet folks from underrepresented, underserved groups as well. So, really DEI is about advocating at a really high level and embracing, that's the word I'm looking for, embracing and appreciating our uniqueness.
Yeah, absolutely. I was sharing with you earlier a book that I started to read this weekend called The Sum of Us by Dr. McGee. And the author takes issue with this idea of a zero sum, right? That if one group in America benefits, the other will lose, and that somehow it's a zero sum game in terms of African Americans versus white Americans, or that we have this built-in notion that somehow it's a competition, a zero sum competition. And her message is, there's so much that we can do together, and so much that can generate such greater equality and democracy from this perspective. So we have a lot of barriers to doing this work and to really embedding it, and it's challenging. It's hard. There's always, you talk a lot of times about people who aren't going to embrace this, are going to wonder why we're doing this work as well. How do you lean into this work, Jeff? You shared about your philosophy and things, but in a bigger sense, where do you see the ways we lean into this? What are the things we can do individually and as an institution, as USG, to really start to defy some of these myths and these structures? What are some action steps we can take?
Well, when I think just some of the things we've mentioned, spending time, being intentional on spending time with people who are different than ourselves, continually reading. Oftentimes throughout the week, folks will send me, and not just here, but just in my experience, folks will send me articles, and they'll say, when I saw this, I thought of you. And one of the things I often say is, well, is did you read it? How about you read it? Then we talk about it at your staff meetings, or we talk about it together over coffee. So I think it starts with just individuals being more self-aware. I think we really have to do a really good job of educating folks on what diversity is not. It is not performative. It's not a month of the year. There are misunderstandings I think that folks have around diversity. One of the misunderstandings I think is there's a sense that everything's just fine. Everything's fine like it is. So we have to be really intentional in educating folks on what diversity is, what some of the benefits are. There's an old saying, a rising tide raises all boats. So it's not a win or a lose. It's not us versus them. No one loses in a culture and environment that's inclusive and diverse. No one loses. We've all been socialized to be and to believe what we believe about the world. A lot of folks have just never had a diversity intervention. So it starts with language. Language matters. And again, really being intentional on educating ourselves. And a question I ask folks sometimes is what is it you need to unlearn? And be willing to step into the vulnerable space of unlearning, particularly about people and cultures that are different than yours.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. Thank you so much. Could you talk a little bit about some of the goals and the vision you have for diversity, equity, inclusion here at Shady Grove? You've done some really interesting things already. We had the wonderful conversation during Black History Month, looking at Maryland history. You brought in Professor Ragsdale to talk with us. I know you're planning some other great things for Women's History Month, but share with us a little bit about how you're thinking about this this infrastructure of DEI at Shady Grove. I'm not going to say office because because it's more than an office. So, but share with us how you're thinking about that, Jeff.
Well, it's this is going to be a huge undertaking. I think number one, I want to be really, I would like for the division, and we haven't settled on a name yet, to be really connected to our strategic initiatives and 2.0. With launching the STEM hub, we want to make sure, and I think I'm tabbed for culture and operations. So we want our DEI thinking to be centered in our STEM hub, to be centered in our culture and operations group. Other things you mentioned, I would like to have a monthly presence where every month we do something that's culturally relevant. This division, one of my initiatives and goals is to really work with our student services group to one of the 9 competencies in our Hire You model is diversity and inclusion. So really developing that. I absolutely want to get from this environmental scan that I've been kind of taking more to a strategic approach. You'll find in this work that a lot of the things that we do, they feel good. And we know that they're the right things to do, but we also want to have data to make sure that they're making a difference. So I want to get more strategic at some point. I want to have a strong presence in professional development, particularly around equity. I've heard that term being used fairly loosely so that we can, organizationally know what equity really means, what it looks like. In addition, I want to have a strong presence around a posture rather than a presence, a strong posture around anti-racism. I know that the University Chancellor's Office has a strategic vision 2030, and that vision, as it relates to DEI work, is deeply rooted in anti-racism. So we always make sure we're connected to the Chancellor's Office and their strategic thinking. We want to make sure that our plans are strongly aligned with our strategic visions and initiatives. So it's those things. Again, it's ongoing. Again, it's diversity is not a month of the year. It's not a day of the year. We can celebrate Black history all year. We can celebrate women's history all year. Certainly we'll be using these months to really highlight it, but the honoring, celebrating, acknowledging folks from all backgrounds and all cultures will be ongoing and all the time.
Thanks. I want to lift up and thank you for recognizing USG 2.0, which is our strategic vision here at Shady Grove, focused on the promise on students not only completing their academic studies, but moving on to meaningful employment and sustainable wage careers and lifelong learning,
Sure.
and the alignment with the system plan. Thank you for that as well, because we do see ourselves very much as connected to the system. So thank you for that.
Sure.
I want to take a little bit of a detour before we move on. And, you mentioned just in passing that you and your daughter have a podcast. And I wonder if you could share with us what that podcast is about and how you got into podcasting.
My daughter, when I worked I have two kids, a son and a daughter. When I worked at the University of Maryland in College Park, one of the first things I did was sign up and put myself on a list to go to the games, the football and basketball games. And my daughter just immediately embraced the high volume atmosphere. And so she's been a long time sports fan. One of the things we talk about is diversity. And so we decided, the two of us, to put our heads together, and our podcast is entitled Diversity in Sports. Our little catchphrase is, with the last name being Ash, that every Wednesday is Ash Wednesday. So we have this podcast where we focus on diversity issues, not only in sports, but environmentally. We focus on dads and daughters, their relationships. We focus on women in sports. We really want to elevate women in sports. So we look at all issues. We talk about, a lot of times this work, there are things that are hard to say and hard for folks to hear. But we like for our podcast to be that place where we not only talk about the joy we have in watching sports and attending sporting events, but some of the underlying issues around diversity in sports. So the acronym is DIS podcast, DIS, Diversity in Sports Podcast. And we have a great time. We've invited dads and daughters on. I think we've probably done about 4 or 5 episodes. We've invited dads and daughters over. We're looking to invite some of the girls basketball coaches, just people in our circle. So it's a fun time. It's a fun time. We have a lot of fun as a dad and daughter together.
What a great idea. Not only a wonderful place, time to spend with your daughter, but also engaging hard topics, but in a really meaningful way. So thank you both for doing that.
Sure.
As a former athlete who I was considered a Title IX baby, because Title IX was fully implemented the first year I went to college. It's come a long way, but there's a long way to go as well. So, well, I wonder if you could just share with us in these closing moments any reflections you have. That in a big way, we're at a point in a time in our country. It's very divided, extremely divided politically, divided in communities, divided in families, and lots of hard conversations that we're just not having. And in part because it's so difficult, and there just isn't a lot of cross thinking and engagement. And to me, a lot of the work that we need to do around inclusion in particular, and just good empathy for each other's experiences. We have so much work to do here, not only in higher education, but in the country, in the world. I wonder, what role do you see an institution like Shady Grove in helping us move forward as a country? Not that Shady Grove can move mountains, but we're a place where people gather and learn
Sure.
and share ideas.
Sure.
How do you see higher education, and in particular, a campus like Shady Grove, helping to move us forward past this point where we can truly engage in ways that we haven't for a long time?
Sure. Well, the advantage of 9 educational partners in one place gives us a unique advantage. I think it's really a matter of truly collaborating and partnering. True partners and collaborators produce something. So I'll be looking to reach out, and I've already began that process of reaching out to our collaborative partners and what is it that we can produce that solves problems. So I think we have the unique structure here with our campus partners to build to produce something significant. You mentioned my word, unprecedented. I think USG, one of the things I would love to have sort of for this division to be a place that's like nowhere else. One of the things that comes to mind is would love to have this intercultural center, welcoming center experience where that invites folks here. Where regardless of your background, it will be a place where you can explore, you can learn. And I think that will be important. I think, as I mentioned, collaborating with our partners to produce, to publish, to present, for this division to be a source, a resource, a hub of sorts for all of our constituents, to have toolboxes, to have learning resources, anything that helps us to work together better, to learn together better, and together is the operative word. One of the things sometimes that I find is there's this competition amongst institutions where we're not competing. I'm not competing with anybody. I want to remove the competitive nature and build more of a collaborative nature. So I think by removing that, this is a win-win. And by working together and having, you mentioned the word conversation, you'll never get the change if we can't have the conversation. So, I want to be intentional on drawing folks here, not only from our collaborative partners, but from folks across this country to really talk about, hopefully this fall, we'll have a summit here inviting diversity leaders from the DC, Maryland, Virginia areas to really talk about some tough issues around language, how our DEI efforts are. We're waiting right now for some Supreme Court decisions to be rendered. So we want to be strategic. We want to be a unified front in getting ahead of some of these narratives. So, I'm digging in. I know my colleagues are digging in. We're bracing in it, and we will embrace any challenges and difficult conversations, which you have to have going forward. Being neutral is no longer acceptable. It's no longer acceptable. It's one thing to when we hear about so many horrific events that happen in our country, it's one thing to condemn them, but it's something else to stand against it. It's one thing to condemn racism. It's something else to stand against it. So I know for us here at USG, I want to make sure that my posture around anti-racism and neutrality is very clear, that we stand against it, and standing against it means something. It's not neutral, it's not quiet, and it's not easy. So I think we have a great opportunity when I think of our university partners to build and produce something that the sky's the limit.
It's not neutral, it's not quiet, it's not easy. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much. This has been a terrific conversation. I'm looking forward to the next Ash Wednesday.
Okay.
And I can listen to DIS, Diversity in Sports, and just so excited to have you here, guiding us, helping us find our way here. And what I hope, again, to use your term, will be an unprecedented approach to the work that we're doing. And couldn't imagine a better partner than Jeff Ash in leading us through this. So thank you so much, Jeff.
Thank you, Ed, for having me. It's a pleasure to be on your team and to work under your direction and leadership. And I'm looking forward to an amazing year and years to come. So thank you for having me.
Perfect. Take care.
All right. Thank you.